Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Chop House. We are back with another edition of the Butcher's Fresh Cuts. I am your host, The Butcher, coming at you with my weekly mouth-watering USDA choice baseball topic, as I do every week. But first, as always, we are a proud part of the Miller Park Minute Podcast and Video Network, the world's only daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. We can be found on YouTube, Anchor, Apple, Google, even rock on Twitch from time to time. Eric goes on there sometimes, so you can chat with him live on there. And you know my guy Eric, he's bringing it every day with the info, the interviews, the hot takes, and much more every single day, 5:30 a.m. Central Time. I highly recommend the interview he did with UK Brew Crew that aired on Monday morning. It was a fantastic interview by two fellas from the opposite sides of the pond, chopping it up about Brewers baseball. It was very informative. It's really cool to see a perspective from someone on the other side of the world, essentially, and how they operate and how they watch baseball and how they have to tune in at different times of the day. It's a really good podcast every time he's on, so definitely check that one out. Also, please like and subscribe to the channel wherever you listen or watch us. Like we said, we come at you every day, and we want to know that you're out there, so please like and subscribe. Also, please comment and chop it up with us over here at the Butcher's Block. We love to talk to you guys. I personally loved all the feedback from last week's video where I shredded Mark Ananasio. Now listen, I'll admit I went a little hard on Marky, and I understand that he's not the only owner of the team. He's just the principal owner. And I guess I'll leave it at that on that topic. But thank you again for all those comments. I hope you got our replies. But anyways, what we do here on the BFC is we like to take a big, healthy slab of a topic and we hoist it up here on the Butcher's Block. And I chop it up real nice so we can get down to the fat and the grizzle and really get into the ins and outs of each topic. We don't skim around here. And if you're a vegetarian, please shield your eyes because it's about to get gritty. But in all seriousness, or whatever this is, what I want to get into today is the MLB rule changes. But not just the three that are being thrust upon the league this year in 2023. No, I want to talk about rule changes throughout all of baseball history and from the ancient times of baseball to today. This is something that I personally never dove into before, at least not at the depth that I did in preparation for this video. And there are so many fascinating aspects about the game 100 years ago and even in more recent times that are interesting and sometimes hilarious that can be uncovered just by going through the rules and how the game has evolved. This exercise is meant to give us some clarity and perspective. To understand that though this season we are seeing some very drastic and monumental changes to the game, all in the course of just one offseason, the idea that there are so many big changes happening all at once, that's not something that's new or out of the ordinary over the course of baseball history. So the Butcher, how we're going to start is the Butcher's going to take you back 166 years, back when there was no Major League Baseball and back even before the National Association was even established. So this is really dating back. So we'll start with a fun little tidbit. Before 1857, baseball games did not end after 9 innings. The games used to end after the inning in which one team scored 21 runs. So it was first to 21 runs, and they would just continue to play innings until the point that one team got to that number. Just imagine with today's baseball climate how long games would be if we had to wait until 21 runs were scored. Teams would have to employ like 30 to 35 pitchers and a staff or more at a time to get through a season, and Rob Manfred would absolutely lose his mind because games would be so long that, according to him, there would be no fans of baseball at all. But that year in 1857, they established the 9-inning game for the first time, with the higher scoring team winning said contest. We're going to move on a year to 1858. The called strike was first introduced, a rule that, of course, still stands today. But funny enough, I would say it's still the most highly debated rule in all of baseball, the called strike. So back in 1858, it was first established, but still the most controversial topic, I think, in baseball on the field. Also in 1858, an interesting take on a rule that still exists. A batter is out on a batted ball, fair or foul, if caught on the fly or after a bounce. So off a one hopper, the batter was automatically out. Nutty. Imagine that. I mean, things would be so much different today if outs could be secured after just a bounce. Moving Moving on to 1862, there was a pitcher's box introduced, and it would be 12 foot by 3 foot. And the pitcher's box would be a thing for the next 31 years until it would finally change to the pitching rubber. 1862 was also the first year that a batter was mandated to actually touch each base when making the circuit. So up until 1862, you could just kind of miss it and it would count, whatever. It'd be kind of crazy at slide place or close place to a base. Also, a big rule was also introduced this year called bases on balls. The walk was first implemented in 1862. The next year, in 1863, they grew that pitcher's box, and pitchers were now outlawed from taking a step during their recovery. And they had to pitch with both feet on the ground at the same time. So just imagine a guy like Woody standing there prone trying to bust out a heater, just standing there in place. Ugly. That had to be really hard to watch, and it really had to be hard for the pitchers to get their job done. Just imagine. The next year in 1864, they got rid of the fair bound out, and that would be the out that the one that we talked about a little bit ago, where it could be an out off of a bounce. In 1864, they got rid of that, and the fly catch was first instituted. In 1867, pitchers were finally allowed to move around inside their box. But before this, essentially, they were just supposed to be standing still the whole time. I bet Rob Manfred would probably readopt this one if he could. In 1868, they ended the 2 feet on the ground rule madness and allowed once again pitchers to lift a foot when delivering the baseball. Thank God they came to their senses on that one. In 1871, the National Association of Professional Baseball Players was first established, and it was the sport's first major league. So essentially, Major League Baseball started in 1871. So all the rules after this were National Association rules. Also, this year, a crazy rule was established, one that just seems insane if it were applied in today's game. The batters at this time were given the privilege of calling for a pitch, either high or low in the zone, based on whatever they wanted to hit. And this practice was already kind of being somewhat utilized in baseball dating back to 1864. Now that's just nuts. I mean, a batter can come up to the plate and say, you know what, I like the high ones. Give me one of them high ones and take a crack at it. So at this time, the game was widely different. So lots of changes happening in the late 1800s here. In 1872, they shrunk the baseball down to the same dimensions that it's being used in today, though the ball itself has changed countless times over the year, most notably in around 1900 at the beginning of the dead ball era. I'm sure you guys have heard that. And in 2019, where we saw the juiced ball, and with record-breaking home run numbers across the board. And judging by how the spring has been going for the Brewers, it almost seems like there might be a juiced ball going on because everybody's popping ding-dongs on the daily down in Maryvale. In 1873, the rule was written that has since doomed Pete Rose, where any player, umpire, or scorer who gambles on a game he takes part in shall be expelled from his club and the National Association. So in 1873, they first established the no gambling. On February 2nd, 1876, the National League was first formed. So that was the birth of the National League where the Brewers currently reside. In 1877, the 15-inch base that lived on every major league field for 146 years was established until finally being put to rest this season. So that base lived with us for a long time, and for the first time, we're seeing the bases enlarged since the late 1800s. Also, player reserve clauses were written into contracts for the first time this season, and we also saw for the first time hitters being exempt in at bat when they drew a walk, and that has stood the test of time. That has been the rule up until today and probably forever. In 1878, a rule was established that just seems absurd and unbelievable. So at this time, the number of called balls per at bat was 9. 9. You could get 9 balls in an at bat before you would draw the walk. The number later dropped to 7 in 1880 and down to 6 in 1883. And finally, in 1889, it was dropped down to 4, where it sits now, and I don't think that'll ever change that. But just the thought of 9 balls, a pitcher could biff at it that many times before he'd have to give you the base. I mean, pitching at that time. I mean, I guess when you're standing with 2 feet on the rubber the whole time, you're going to have a hard time. getting it over the plate very often. In 1880, batters were no longer awarded a fourth strike. So up until this point as well, it was 9 balls, 4 strikes. Another crazy concept. Also at this time, pitchers were throwing from just 50 feet away to the center of home plate, a difference of 10.5 feet from today's mound length to home. This was also the year that established the catchers had to catch the third strike of an at-bat to record the out without having to throw to first base. In 1882 saw the dawn of the sidearm pitcher, and this was the first year pitchers were allowed to throw in that fashion according to the rules. So all the way back in 1882, guys were slinging it from the side, shooting from the hip. In 1883, the rules made it so that teams in championship games would be decided by winning percentage. Obviously, that's changed with the playoff formats that dawned in the middle of the next century. In 1886, stolen bases were first recorded as a stat. Ricky Henderson, pretty happy about that one. And the next one, something strange and unusual happened in 1887. For some reason, which I haven't been able to find any documented reason as to why, but bases on balls were recorded as hits in 1887. And this resulted in hugely inflated batting average, with 11 players that season batting 400 or better, and this experiment was abolished the following season. Cap Anson was awarded the batting title that season, where he hit 421 with the walks. So without the walks being recorded as hits, the title would have been held by Sam Thompson of the Detroit Wolverines, who hit 347 actually batting average. How's that for a blast from the past? Cap Anson and Sam Thompson. You're not getting that anywhere else on the internet right now, I don't think, folks. In 1887 was the first time batters would be awarded first base after being hit by a pitch. Coaches were first recognized by the rules, and home plate was changed to rubber instead of marble that it used to be made of. Marble home plates up until 87. In 1888, sack hits made their first appearance in record keeping, and this also marked the first year of player substitution. This season, just one sub could be used after the end of an inning. By 1891, all subs were allowed at any place at any time. Moving on to 1893, that pitching box that we talked about stood the test of time for 31 years. It was eliminated for the rubber slab, which was moved from 50 feet that we talked about before, and in 1893 was moved to the 60 foot 6 inches from the rear of the plate, the same spot it sits to this day 130 years later, though there could have been discussions in baseball circles about moving it back due to the higher velocities thrown by pitchers these days, so that 60 foot 6 might not always stand. In 1894, foul bunts became strikes, sack bunts are no longer at bats, and a held foul tip becomes a strike. In 1895, we saw the dawn of the infield fly rule, and the pitching slab grew to its current size of 2 foot by 6 inches. In 1899, by the end of the century, batters were awarded first on catcher's interference. In 1900, we're getting to the modern times, essential dead ball and then modern times. In 1900, home plate became home plate. The plate changed from a square to the 5-sided home-shaped pentagon that it still is today, 17 inches wide, just as it should be, never to be widened. Got that? In 1901, the American League is formed. Also in 1901, the rules made that all foul balls not caught on the fly now count as strikes until 2 strikes are to the batter. Everyone knows that. That one still stands. In 1903, the first World Series was played, and the Boston Americans beat the Pittsburgh Pirates 5-3 in a best-of-9 series. The World Series used to be played in a best-of-9 series. I'd vote for that again. In 1909, it was established that relief pitchers must face at least one batter, and that stood up until 2020 when the 3-batter minimum rule was adopted in Major League Baseball. In 1917, the year of our Lord, earned runs are first defined as a stat, giving pitchers a much more fair shake on their stat sheets. That's the beginning of stats starting to take effect, and you can start to differentiate players for their values at this time, especially pitchers. In 1920, all freak deliveries such as the spitball are outlawed. Rest in peace, the spitball, the men. Man, that would make a great name for a dog. Also, before 1920, a batter would not be credited with a home run if he hit one while the winning run was on base. And also in 20, RBI became an official stat, and defensive interference was defined and now scored. In 1925, ballpark minimum home run distance was set at 250 feet. Thanks, Babe Ruth. In 1931, the ground rule double was introduced and sac flies were temporarily eliminated, and spectator interference, batter contact foul, and throwing of the glove rules were instituted. Now, we hit a brief period of years here where no major changes are being made to the rules of the game. 16 years until the next major shift in baseball happened, and this point is by far the greatest and most important change in baseball, and to this day, and I think forever, it will always be the most important shift that we've ever seen in Major League Baseball. In April of 1947, Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier when he put on the Dodgers 42 and changed and repaired baseball forever, fixing the game and making it as it should be. Later in 1950, it was established that the home team must bat second, and they changed the strike zone. In 1954, they brought back the sac fly, but only on scoring plays. Man, what was their problem with the sac fly back in those days? I love a good sac fly. In 1959, the MLB set new ballpark boundaries for every ballpark in baseball, with a minimum of 325 feet to left and right, and a minimum of 400 feet to the center field wall. In 1963, they changed the strike zone again. In 1969, they dropped the pitcher's mound from 15 inches to 10. This was a pretty big one. This changed everything. And this was directly as a result of 1968's Year of the Pitcher, featuring the greatest season by any pitcher ever. Fight me, Bob Gibson's famous 1.12 ERA masterpiece of a season, so good that they had to lower the mound to give batters a chance. Also in 1969, saves became a recorded stat, and they changed the strike zone. In 1971, it was made a rule that all batters and runners must wear protective helmets while in play. In 1973, the American League adopted the designated hitter, and my grandpa's still mad. In 1975, the ball was now permitted, this is a fun one. In 1975, the ball was now permitted to be covered in cowhide because of the horse shortage at the time. Now, did we figure out the horse thing? Do we have any more horses now? Anyone? Please leave a comment. Horse people, leave comments. In 1975 also saw the year of suspensions being given out for doctored or corked bats. Sammy Sosa. In 1978, pitchers could be thrown out for throwing at batters for the first time. 10 years of the same rules gave way to 1988. Another safety rule, where catchers must now wear protective helmets while on defense. Before that, it wasn't too uncommon for the catcher to just be wearing a cap backwards underneath his face mask. And now, we've reached the longest stretch in MLB history without a rule change. 30 years. This could be considered a golden era. It sure was for me growing up. I mean, between these years is when I, as a child, watched most of my baseball. And maybe there's something to that. No rule changes happening for such a long time. From 1988 to 2008, without a major rule change to the world's greatest game, outside of the steroid stuff, but really on-field rules, there wasn't any major shifts going on for 30 years. In 2008, the MLB adopted the replay system. This was a highly fought over, especially by the umpires union, of course, but I don't think anyone is upset about this one to this day. I think the rules, in fact, I think it rules, in fact, and I think people want it for balls and strikes too. They want to increase the use of replay in games. In 2014, we saw the Buster Posey rule, which eliminated a runner from deviating from his direct pathway in order to collide with catcher to get him to drop the ball, essentially. Also, catchers can no longer block the plate with the ball in their possession. In 2016, we saw further safety tweaks on slides toward bases during double plays. That's the any bag. And of course, in 2020, we saw a slew of changes due to the shortened season, and nobody knew what the hell to do about anything at this time. We all just knew we wanted baseball of some sort. We didn't really care how we got it. We saw the dawn of the 3-batter minimum rule, ghost runner and extras, the social distancing rules, quarantining, no fans, the first year of the universal DH, and postseason expanding to a whopping 16 teams. The Brewers are very thankful for that expansion, so they can say they got 4 years in a row in the postseason. But I mean, heck, we made it. We made it that year, baby. We can call it. In 2022, we saw the first draft lottery in an effort to eliminate tanking. You can ask the Reds about how that one's going. And of course, 2023's offseason brought us the ones that everyone's been talking about endlessly for the last couple months. increasing the base sizes to 18 inches square, which shortens the base paths, the ban in the defensive shift, and the permanent ghost runner for extra innings. And now we've talked about 100 or more rule changes over the course of 166 years. We've talked about many large aspects of this game being shifted and toyed with over the years. From pitchers hitting to not hitting, from the walls of the parks being pushed back, even the mound being lowered because pitchers are just that damn good. We've seen the strike zone be defined and redefined countless times. We've seen stats spring up that tell the tale of the game in ways we couldn't before certain periods of this game's history. We've seen restrictions and new allowances. We've seen it all. But one thing that has never changed, and it has been a fact of the game, and I'm not talking about the clock between innings, because that's just between innings. In the game, we've never had a clock. Now, we all seen the Earl Weaver quote. We all know it, but I'm going to read it anyways. You can't sit on a lead and run a few plays into the line and just kill the clock. You got to throw the ball over the damn plate and give the other man his chance. That's why baseball is the greatest game of them all. Now, I also know this quote does sort of still stand. There is no cap in the time of the game itself, but it never felt like to me that the game needed a clock. Now, I completely understand, as well as the game does need to speed up, we do need more action. We do need more hits. We do need more balls in play. I'll grant that any day for sure. And I understand as well that I'm not going anywhere. I'll love this game till the day I die, and a stupid clock isn't going to change that. But for better or worse, all of us have to admit that this is changing. That is something that is absolutely fundamental about the game of baseball. This is a huge change for the players, both on offense and defense, and it's an adjustment for both pitchers and batters alike. Baseball has always been a game that has been played at the pace of baseball. It is its own universe where the boundaries of time don't exist. Whether good or bad, we've now invited time into the game. And time is what ages us. Time is what makes us anxious. Time is what means that we are finite as a species and that our days are numbered. In baseball, it existed a dimension where we could sit and exist in a place where the constraints of time didn't entirely exist, but by the pace of that which baseball itself decided to move. And as we've seen all the rules of the past that we've talked about, these timing rules be tweaked, they will be changed. I doubt we will see many games end on a clock violation like we did this spring after this year. They must change that because that is just distasteful, and they're not going to allow that to happen in postseason in important games. They're not. And we will learn to accept and move on, and I will learn to accept and move on. But I just want to pinpoint this moment in time and illustrate that the game, though it will continue to be great in all its ways, it will never be the same. And while you're out there changing rules, do me a favor, don't widen the plate.
Thank you for watching the Miller Park Minute. Go Brewers!